HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
This episode is made possible thanks to listeners like you. Want to support independent food radio? Go to heritageradionetwork.org/donate today.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Adam Teeter. We'll talk to Adam, of course, about wine. We'll talk to him about VinePair and a lot more. Adam brought in a red blend from Virginia, which we'll taste for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. All right, Adam Teeter's experience ranges from out of college working for the Consulate General of Israel, the Brooklyn Philharmonic, Tablet Magazine, creating a music and wine site called Vivo and Vino, and he is currently the co-founder, or he co-founded and is the CEO of VinePair, a media company about wine, beer, and spirits. But we'll get into a lot more about what it really is. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Adam.
Thanks for having me. I can't believe you found the Consulate General fact. That was a very brief time in my career.
You're like Super Jew. Consulate General, Tablet Magazine, all this crazy stuff. It was fun. All right, so Adam, welcome to the show. I think I said that. As always, I ask my guests to give them a little context and give me a little background about your journey in life and wine that got you to the present, which is VinePair. We don't have to go too far back, but what kind of formed the interest, influenced you, and the things, that brought you here?
Yeah, totally. So I would say I actually came to wine through craft beer. So when I was in college, I went to college at Emory in Atlanta, and a brewery called Sweetwater had just opened in the city, and it was the first time that craft beer had really come to Atlanta. And they used to do this really cool thing where you could work the line on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays and help them bottle the beer. And it was the first time I had tasted really good beer.
And we're talking over a dozen years ago.
Yeah, 2003. So I was illegally
So the
drinking.
craft beer thing isn't what people know it to be
Not
today.
at all.
Right.
And my co-founder now in VinePair actually was my college roommate. And we were always pretty scrappy, and we convinced Sweetwater while we were underage to sponsor one of our house parties. So
it's a good move.
So they donated a bunch of kegs, and we had this crazy party. We got evicted because of it, and that kind of bit the bug for being really interested in these quality drinks and these experiences. And so when I moved to New York, I was dating my now wife, and we would go out to dinner, and I started getting really intimidated, by wine. I would look at the menu and feel like maybe I was going to get ripped off. I didn't really trust the people that were there to serve me. And so I would talk to, Naomi about this, and she was like, well, why don't we start a wine club? So that's how it really started, was I don't know. We were at that age where you just want to have a lot of clubs because you wanted excuses to get together with your friends. So we start this wine club, which
was more of a get together than mailing wines out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was so basically once a month,
real club.
Once a month, 20 of us piled into a tiny apartment, and everyone was responsible for bringing a bottle of wine. So we brought 20 bottles of wine.
That's a good move.
And it was always a theme, and you had to do research on your bottle. And then you would sort of talk about what this wine was, what you learned about the producer. We're sort of trying to teach ourselves about wine quality. There was always sort of a price ratio. And then at the end of the night, we would vote on what the favorite wine was, and that person got to pick the theme for the next month. So we did that for about 2 years, and at the same time...
Wow, you kept it going that long?
And at the same time...
And all like people, similar age?
Everyone was a millennial.
Okay.
And then at the same time, I got involved at a record label. So I was doing A&R and events and things like that for this record label called J-Dub. And so we'd sign bands like Balkan Beatbox and Matis Yahoo and all this other stuff. And I noticed that the bands I was working with were also really into wine in a really interesting way. They weren't this sort of stereotypical yo, let's crush light beer and Jameson backstage. On their riders, they would request really good wine. And so I'd moved to the East Village, and this wine shop had opened up called Alphabet City Wine Company. And my wife and I walked in. We were still dating at the time. We didn't get married that young. And and we walked in, and we were like, hey, do you guys ever... I don't know, we just dug the vibe of the place. They had couches in the front, and people were just kind of hanging out and drinking wine while people were shopping. And I'd never experienced that before in a wine shop, especially in New York City. So I was like, wow, this place looks really cool. I wonder if they teach about wine. I wonder if they have wine classes. And so the owner was like, I don't know anything about wine, but my co-owner does. And he was like, he'll teach you. So we were like, we're going to move our wine club to you guys. And they happened to also own this restaurant called Vino. And so this guy was Keith Beavers. He's VinePair's tasting director now. So full circle. And Keith would let us come to his restaurant every Saturday and learn about wine. And I just, he taught me everything I know. And I just became obsessed. And not just obsessed with wine, but obsessed with making wine accessible. It wasn't just oh, now I'm going to go take all these tests and yada, yada, yada. I became really obsessed with breaking down these barriers. And so Keith and I together started this thing called Vivo and Vino. So I had all these connections in the music business. I knew all these bands, I knew all these agents. And so we convinced them to, when their bands would play, Webster Hall or Bowery Ballroom or whatever, to on that second night, do an intimate show with us, with a different set list, acoustic, and we'd pair them with a winemaker.
Wow.
So we did the Antlers, Freelance Whales, Bare Hands, really awesome bands, Nicole Atkins. And we paired them with amazing winemakers Andre Mack of Mouton Noir, and really, really cool people would come by and pair their wines. And halfway through the set, we'd have this dialogue between the winemaker and the band about creativity and what got them into music and what got them into wine. And it was really cool. And it was, again, I was just watching it break down these barriers for people in the audience being like, wow, wine actually isn't this snobby, intimidating thing that I thought it was. And so, the Music and Wine series stopped. And
it's still such a good idea.
It's an amazing idea, right?
I mean, it's got to be
rebooted
at some point.
I want to bring it back. And I wound up going back to business school because the record label I was at went bankrupt. And I was going part-time at Stern, trying to figure out a way to hustle and stay in New York. And at this point, I was getting married. So that's when I went to Tablet. And I still was really enraptured by what was happening. Now I had these two loves, right? It was wine and going, cooking and dining and all this stuff, and media. And so I fell back in love with media because I was a journalism major in college, and then sort of I really went away from it. And Josh, who was my college roommate, and I were chatting, and we were like, why does Eater exist, but there's not a contemporary in the drink space? Right? Why has no one done that? Why is there no super accessible, fun to read, interesting publication? And so we were like, why don't we just start it? And that's how VinePair started. So I quit my job. He quit his.
What year was that?
This was in 2014.
Okay.
And then it took off from there. I mean, the biggest thing of why it really took off, I mean, we were growing. We were doing, I think, 500,000 uniques at the time, is Gary Vaynerchuk reached out to us. And he was like, I've seen you guys, whatever, let's come in and meet. And we went in and met with him. And that was the thing. We'd sort of tried to raise money a little bit early on. And everyone in New York asks you, have you talked to Gary? Everybody, right? If you haven't talked to Gary and you're starting anything in alcohol.
Especially wine.
Yeah, dude, you got to talk to Gary.
Wine online.
So Gary was like, I really dig this. I haven't ever invested in a media company like this before, but I'm going to write a check in the room. I mean, and you know him, right? So like that energy was just there. And then he introduced us to a bunch of amazing people. And, you know, a lot of people who originally invested in Teeter came on board, like Joanne Wilson and Zach Nelson and all these really amazing people. And then it just exploded from there. And that then got me really into, again, then I fell back in love with craft beer and back in love with spirits and the whole cocktail scene through covering it. But it was all through wine.
When you launched, was it initially or primarily wine and you expanded, or you always did a little coverage of beer and spirits?
We always knew it was going to be all three, but we launched primarily with
Heavily.
wine with a little bit more of beer and spirits. And now it's, I mean, you can look at the content any day and it's a third. You know, it's pretty equal in terms
Is
of
it?
what we're covering. Yeah.
Okay.
And the readership, it's really interesting. Like when you look at the analytics, 1 month we'll have more people reading, you know, beer stories than, but the other thing that I think is really cool and shows what's happening in the current generation is that the reader, if you follow their journey on the site, will read a wine story and then a beer story, and then they'll go back to a wine story, then they'll read a cocktail story. So it's very rare
One,
that
because
you
it's
have
there, and two, you know,
everyone
that's
drinks
the
everything.
market that's
yeah,
interested.
it's interesting. We're not like you know, we joke like your dad was a Scotch drinker and that's what he drank all the time, right? And your mom was a white wine with ice cubes drinker or whatever.
Right.
That's not the case anymore, right? Like people have a cocktail when they go out to dinner and then they get a nice bottle of wine,
Right.
and then they're like, oh, let's go. There's a cool brewery that let's get a beer before we go home.
Right.
So it's cool.
It's definitely spread out. So I want to do a few things.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on a bunch of things about wine, and then I want to talk about VinePair. So you'll have the opportunity to tell me about everything. But, you know, as you explained a little, you've been embedded in the market, and I think you have a pretty sense of what's going on. So let's start with, are we in the midst of a new generation of wine drinkers?
Yeah, I absolutely think so.
So who are they?
So I'm not going to say they're millennial. That's like, I mean, they are, but they're also younger Gen Xers, and they're, you know, this Gen Z that's graduating college now.
Which is legal drinking
exactly.
age, just about, right?
Exactly. Like, I mean, we have...
So are we talking 3 group categories?
I think it's all the same. It's an attitude, and that attitude is...
No, but technically, there's
Yes.
millennials. Who's graduating? Help me.
Gen Z.
And then who's in the middle?
Gen X.
Okay.
So Gen X is like...
All of them are legal
All
to
of them are
drink.
legal.
Very active consumers.
Very active
We'll talk
consumers.
later how they're an important, you know, audience
Yeah.
of yours. But so that's who they are. Now, how are they changing?
So for them, it's much more about experience. It's much more about culture. It's much more about the stories. That's what matters. So scores don't matter. Price point doesn't matter as much, right? They're going premium, so they're buying nicer bottles. They're buying better beers. It's all about quality. And this is a generation that, you know, when they go on vacation, they plan to visit. If a winery's in the area, they'll hit the winery up.
Right.
They'll go to a cool craft brewery. That to them is part of seeing the local scene. And they're really, really interested in how this bottle was made, who the person is behind it.
Story and experience.
It's super, super interesting.
So when you got into it, one of the things I didn't ask you is you didn't have aspirations for trophy wines
No.
or all. You were looking for interesting wine stories and all of
Yeah.
that.
I still don't have any trophy wine.
You don't need them. But you also said they'll pay for more wine. I mean, you've probably done, you know, some research or know the analytics. I mean, what's a premium bottle to that?
$20.
$20?
Yeah, $20 is pretty average on a weeknight. And I'm talking, obviously, we could use trade terms of off-premise. But, you know, if you go to the wine shop, a $20 bottle is a pretty easy sell to most of our readers, most of this generation. And what's shrinking is that under $10 market that used to be massive.
But that's crap wine, though,
crap
right?
wine.
I mean, that's the manufactured mega purple.
Crap
which
wine.
they're not interested
Not at
in,
all.
the market.
And then I think they're also willing to pay for premium when, you know, they also know that the farming was biodynamic, organic, or sustainable. When they know that the winemaker was quality, you know, when they and then
Right.
the label matters, right? The bottle's got to look cool too. Like that's what I talk to producers a lot about. Is like it doesn't matter if the juice is really good if they don't think that they look cool. Putting it on the table for their friends, you're not going to sell your wine.
Right. Which goes to label, marketing,
Yeah.
story.
Everything.
It's amazing. So what effect and change do you think that's had on wine? I mean, is the luxury market shrinking? I mean, so now you have.
The luxury is never going to shrink because you're always going to have people who work at certain jobs who ultimately make a certain salary, who are influenced by the people above them, who become collectors. I think you have less collectors than you used to. I don't have a cellar. I think it's pretty rare. There's just space. We're all moving to cities. We all have less space.
It's partially that.
Yes.
It's the collector mentality is not a big deal either. Right?
And I think, no, it's not. And I think we're also, we're less willing to wait. We're super impatient. I mean, we're the generation that's I look at my phone all the time because I'm bored. What am I doing? So I don't want to sit and wait. Oh, this is going to drink great in 10 years. I don't have 10 years to wait. And I mean, that's
not important.
No. And that's, I'll tell this to producers too. Like, if you're going to tell me your wine's good 10 years, then you hold the wine in 10 years and then sell it back to me in 10 years. I'll pay the premium to drink it when you say it's going to be great, but I don't want to hold it for 10 years.
All right, so let's just go back a second, not to be repetitive, but the things that interest people are there's about a $20 range, up or down a little.
Yeah.
A label can influence people. If you know a little about, if you're into organic or natural, which I want to talk to you in a few minutes, that producer, that story may influence you to buy you. And those are the things that are more important. They're not collectors.
They're not collectors. They're not.
So that's a fairly big change from.
They're also really unaware of these big names that I think producers think are still. So, for
Give
example,
me one in your
Sassicaia. They'd have never heard of it.
It's so much money and it's not important. And there's great. I mean, Italy's a center for natural wines and all of that.
Yeah,
what about like Camus and Opus and no interest?
Some, I mean, if they've been to Napa, that was probably something that someone recommended them. Like, oh, you should go to Camus.
Well,
and
just because it's the States and all.
Exactly. But like these big bottles, I mean, okay, they know the big champagne producers because champagnes are a brand. But in terms of these wines, no.
Is champagne an interest?
Champagne's an interest for everyone.
So
always.
We're big advocates on the show, but that's one of the wines that you bust out over $20.
Yeah, I mean, and look,
is it beyond celebratory? Because a lot of the people that come in here are champagne fanatics. They pair it with everything. All the great restaurants now have great champagne lists. Don't drink it just as celebratory. Millennials look at it still more. They're not drinking it.
No, they're not drinking it every night.
Kick a meal off.
No, it's still celebration. It's too
Yeah.
expensive. I mean, I think, and at the end of the day, $20 is that average weeknight bottle price. They'll go higher for the weekend.
Yeah.
They'll spend $100
or dinner with four other friends.
But like again, champagne is expensive. And so
But it's cool.
But it's cool.
Right.
So if it's a special occasion, if it's someone's birthday, if it's just a promotion, if it's whatever, then it's champagne all day.
All right. So this kind of works into that because I think the market are big users. How do you think social media and new media, and we'll put VinePair as new media, how do you think it's changed and influenced wine, the consumer? I mean, this is what you do. I mean, what are you doing?
I think the really interesting thing about it is it puts more power in the consumer because there's just more information. So we see, which is really crazy, the traffic on VinePair spikes on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights.
Because of I'm going out and I have
or you're standing in the wine shop and you don't want, for whatever reason, you don't want to talk to the person in the shop, and you go on VinePair and you search and you read our articles and then you buy the wine.
So let's put that to accessibility.
Yep.
Okay. Your first point, could we put it to democratization?
Absolutely.
That there's more places to go. It's not just Robert Parker or Wine Spectator and all that. There's blogs and everything.
And it's your friends, right? So like now a friend goes
peer
out.
to peer now?
Yeah, like a friend. So let's say like last night, for example, I went out and was drinking at a wine bar I like in the East Village called Ruffian, right? And great bar. And so I Instagrammed a bottle I was drinking, and I had a friend right back and be like, oh my gosh, got to try this, right? So it's even just that of like someone's out to dinner and because you assume unless the person's an influencer and that was paid, which I think we're also becoming more aware of, and that's losing its credibility among this generation because we're starting to realize like I don't want to follow people being paid to push stuff at me. But when your friends Instagram something, they loved it. So if I'm putting a bottle,
there's good discovery there.
There's good discovery.
And if it's your friends, it's funny. You and I have issues with sommeliers, but most sommeliers are not on the take. thing is tasting wine.
Yeah.
And by following them, it's like, they're drinking some cool stuff.
They're
too.
drinking super cool stuff. I think I follow lots of somms. I think the only issue sometimes is they're drinking stuff that's very hard to find or very highly allocated.
Right.
And so with that,
They're the few that get it.
and that's hard because as a consumer, then it becomes frustrating. Like I was following a somm that I like a lot, and I saw someone in the comments post at one point, and the somm took it kind of hard, and I felt bad. But it was like, hey man, I wish you wouldn't just post wines I can never drink.
Right.
I really like you. I dig your vibe, but like all you do is post wines I can't drink,
Like
and that's hard.
and all these, other guys.
Yeah.
Boil this down to a couple things, but what you've been writing about recently and what's been going on. Tell me about the big stories or trends. I don't need 20 or 30 of them, but where have we moved to? I mean, we may have sort of broached a couple of things, but what's kind of happening on the site and in the market that you think? Where are things going? Or
I mean, I think we're further moving towards a democratization. We're moving towards a quality is more important, story is more important than just the score or who made it even. So if the wine's good, the wine's good. We don't really care as much anymore, like how big the producer is, et cetera. Like,
so you're selective in who you're going to write about or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to play to the audience. There's enough wine out there.
Absolutely. There's enough wine out there. And then I think the bigger stories are really about what's happening. So, our motto is drinking is culture. And so it's the bigger stories that are happening in the country too.
Wait,
right?
what's
So
the motto?
Drinking is culture.
Drinking is culture.
So, so we look at everything through the lens of a glass, but, it's the same major stories we're dealing with in terms of what's happening with equality and how we're trying to address that in the industry. This has been an industry that for the longest time has only sold to white people. And so
Marketed.
yeah. So how do we start shedding light on the fact that there's a huge market out there that wants to drink these wines as well that everyone's ignoring, and that has been pigeonholed into saying, oh well, this demographic only likes white, or this demographic only likes sweet, or this demographic will never drink wine. It's just not true. And so we're trying to help tell those stories as well, because that's a big thing that we're having to grapple with as a country, I think. And then we do look at this larger trend as well of everything being very, very experience driven, right? So the experience is almost as important, right? So a wine bar now is awesome, not just because of the wines you drank, but because of the experience you have at that bar. Right. So who are the people that work there? What's the vibe?
A little education.
Exactly.
Vibe, maybe the food.
Right. Which is what makes
whatever.
a bar. I mean, not to
The people that come there.
I'll
too.
keep plugging Ruffian, but like,
Yeah, no, that's a good example.
right. They're behind the bar. The Patrick and Alexis that own it. They're usually there, and they'll teach you everything about the wine, and that makes the experience as good or better than almost any other place you could drink at.
I agree. So you said wine is cultural. Do you think wine still has sort of an elitist tinge to it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what?
It's a luxury product.
So I was going to say, define that. It has that elitist tinge because it's a luxury product. There's a ton of it that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
It's there still is a vocabulary that we feel like we need in order to understand it. So if the issue with wine is, like, think about it this way: the majority of Americans don't speak a second language. So how do we expect that the majority of Americans will speak a language of wine, right? But those that do possess that knowledge and do possess that vocabulary have a leg up in terms of understanding wine, in terms of talking about wine, et cetera. That was one of the biggest reasons that we started VinePair, is we wanted to start trying to educate people and say, okay, well, here's what these words mean. Here's when you need to use them. Here's when you don't need to use them. And so it still does have an elitist tinge. And then there is always going to be that percentage of the population, we'll call them the 1%, who will collect, who will go to auction. That market's not going to go away. And who will still look at this
Will it eventually wither, or people will always sort of fall into it?
People are always going to fall into it.
I mean, because when all the baby boomers and those guys die, I mean, do the other guys push up and still do that?
I think maybe to a lesser extent, but
Maybe.
there's
That's the
still,
answer.
but we don't know. And
Right.
at some point, like, I'm not here to convince those people not to do that. If you want to do that, if that's what gives you pleasure, fine, whatever. I mean, then you won't wind up reading VinePair, and that's fine.
Right. All right. I want to talk about VinePair, but before we get to that, I want to just do like a quick lightning round and get your take on a few things.
Yeah.
I think a big part of the wine world is sommeliers, wine lists, restaurants, even retail. Let's leave the retail out. I see on this show there's a new generation of sommeliers, whether it's a Jonel Feinler and Sarah Thomas at La Bernardine and all that, but that's not the majority. I mean, our sommeliers, I think we talked about it a little, that they're posting and drinking wines, but what about that experience going into a restaurant? That was one of the reasons, that's something that inspired you to...
I think that, unfortunately, there's, a lot of people who are somms who are good friends of mine, and I know that their intention is to help, but consumers still don't trust them. It's a really...
Why?
Because I think we think in all aspects of purchase, when it comes to buying diamonds for engagement, when it comes to buying really nice suits or whatever, that someone's trying to screw us.
It's a little expensive. It's a little unknown.
It's an American mentality.
It is an American mentality.
So as much as
you know a little about it.
Right. So as much as we push and say, hey, we really think that you should give these people a chance and you should listen to them and tell them, there's so many articles we have on the site that's like, just say the price you want to spend. Just say it. They're not going to give you a $150 bottle of wine if you say that you want to spend 40 to 60 bucks. But there's this mentality that you can't. And so therefore you're like, don't trust this person. I'm going to go to my phone. I'm going to look at what, Vino. And then also I think there's this disconnect too of understanding, in the U.S. that, guys, there is a markup. I get that you can pay this for the wine at retail. There's a 3 times usually markup in restaurants. If you don't want to pay
some
that,
are less, some are way more.
Some are way more.
You seek that out,
and it's the cost of doing business. It's the cost of going out to eat.
Right.
And so I think that also though consumers think why are they ripping me off? Who's trying to? It's a problem.
It's that unknown thing. So you sort of say that they're not doing a great job. Making people feel more comfortable or connecting them to wine.
I think they're trying. I think that it's a two-way street. The consumer also has to meet them halfway.
Right.
The consumer has to be more willing to be trusting.
But the onus is on the som.
Well, I think a lot of it's the vocabulary we talked about. I think there's if you come to the table and the goal is to show how much you know, you're going to intimidate the person. And the person doesn't want to be intimidated.
Right.
we don't want to sit there and
That's
feel
good advice
and feel super intimidated. Just come and be, again, at the places that do it the best, the person just super happy and say, okay, what do you like to drink? If you start
Right.
with that, even if they tell you the prisoner, or Miyomi.
Well, first they know it's red, it's a blend,
Right.
residual sweetness.
And
they
then
can go in
help
that
them.
direction. And all
I think it's the places where it feels like you're being told what to do, that the person
Right.
becomes really scared, and that's not all places, right? But that's I think the ones that wind up causing this reputation to occur.
So don't be scared. Speak up. Tell people what you like.
Exactly.
We kind of didn't steer into this, but I can't avoid asking you. Let's talk about natural wines, the natural wine movement. I think a lot of the stuff you're talking about, the experiences, the wines, millennials, there's a preference there. But there's a bigger thing. I mean, I don't want to go into the definition of natural wine.
Because you can't define it.
You can. I mean, there's organic makers, biodynamic. You could be organic and screw it up in the cellar. But it's a movement. Here to stay?
I'm not so sure.
Why?
I think that the wine being made in an organic, biodynamic, sustainable manner, absolutely here to stay. I think wines that taste like kombucha, potentially not here to stay. I think we have to remember in the world of wine that we are in a bubble. New York is a bubble, LA is a bubble, San Francisco is a bubble. Outside of this bubble, natural wine is not a thing. People have not heard of it before. They've not had them. These wines that are natural are very highly allocated. A lot of them are such small production, super hard to find. So I think in these cities, will natural wine always be a thing? Yeah, at certain bars that will specialize in it. I think there will be a pushback. I think that there's a little bit of right now, the people who are pushing natural wine are pretty aggressive about it. I think that's turning some people off. So, so you'll have that, right? Because you're having the same of this is how it's supposed to be. And then you have other wine people saying, that's the same thing that Parker was doing. Parker was telling everyone how wine should taste.
Good point.
You're doing the same thing.
Good point.
You didn't like him, so back off a little bit. And don't make people feel bad if they do like a wine that you think is too oaky or whatever.
They're a little more aggressive.
Yeah, but I think, some
But
of those wines are amazing.
any product, there's going to be crappy stuff and good stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, I don't even want to say that maybe there's more crappy natural wine, which is not true. But part of it is some inconsistency and
There
funkiness
is.
and all that. But that's a segment. That's
It's a
not
segment.
the whole movement.
Look, there's a movement of people who are really obsessed with sour beers. And it's the same, it's a very similar, right? And so that's a growing movement in the world of craft beer that's not overtaking IPAs any day ever.
No,
And I don't think it will either, because there's a certain segment that likes that flavor profile, which that's the biggest thing that I think is like I do think the explosion of natural wine for a lot of people is the quality of what's happening in the vineyards, but for just as many, it's a flavor profile. And that
Right.
flavor profile of very juicy, sour, sort of mousiness, Band-Aid, etc., is pleasurable. Cool, gives you pleasure, good for you. But like that's not going to be a segment that's going to overtake people who are really into purity of fruit and beautiful acidity and balance. It's just not.
Right. It's a good point, and the sour beer is a good point. Adam, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about VinePair and what you're doing there. Then I want to subject you to our wine list, and we'll taste a little of this wine from Virginia that you brought in. We're talking to Adam Teeter from VinePair, and you're listening to the Grape Nation on Heritage Radio Network.
This episode is brought to you by you. As an independent member-supported nonprofit, the amazing content you hear on HRN is made possible thanks to our generous community of members and partners. For 10 years, HRN has been a defining voice in America's food movement, and we never would have made it this far without you. Join us in celebrating an amazing decade of food radio and support our summer fun drive by becoming a member of HRN. You can choose from our member gifts and will receive exclusive discounts on HRN events. We truly believe that with your help, we can change the world and our food system one bite or soundbite at a time. But there's no food radio without you. Go to heritageradionetwork.org/donate before July 31st to do your part to ensure a bright future for your favorite food podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Adam Teeter. Adam is the proprietor. He's the guy who co-founded VinePair. And Adam, I want to talk to you about VinePair. And I guess really the best way is because we have to make the assumption that some people never friggin' heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Always.
that's partially why you're here. So, what is VinePair? And give me an idea of mission statement and objective
So
to frame it, and then we'll talk about specifically what you're doing.
So we're a multi-dimensional media company. So we have a magazine, print. We have a digital media property that we publish, 5 to 8 stories a day. We have a podcast. We do events. We have we have a commerce platform. So lots of different stuff in terms of what VinePair is. Our overall motto is drinking is culture. So the idea is that we examine the stories of the world through the lens of the glass. So I want to tell just as many stories about culture, politics, history, business as I do a profile of a cool person in the industry.
But the former 3 things are done through the lens of a glass?
Through the lens of alcohol, right?
Okay.
So if I can explain to you the economics of what's happening in China through the gifting market in wine, that was a story we published a few years ago, then we will. If we can talk about, what's happening in terms of, fights for equality and things like that through what's happening in the wine business, we will. I think that's, everything is inherently political, and that's also our job as lifestyle journalists is, lifestyle should encompass our lives. It shouldn't just be a profile of a winemaker and their family, or the third profile
Right.
of that same winemaker.
Right. I mean, there's such a lifestyle built around wine and all that, so
Exactly.
you might as well do all of that. There's competition out there. How is VinePair different than other people? Covering wine, and let me mention that there's significant coverage of beer and spirits. You did explain that it kind of kicked off with wine and it grew out and all of that. But everything from Wine Spectator, who's huge, to Punch. I mean, how do you differentiate yourself?
I mean, I think we're really taking a very culture first approach. We're also taking a massive accessibility approach. So I don't, we try to define everything.
I think culture you explain. What's massive accessibility approach you mean?
We try to be very not simplistic in terms of the way that we write, but we want to explain to you what these things are we're talking about. So we want you to understand what terroir actually is. We don't just use the term and throw it around like you should know what it is. We want you to understand why, people actually are drinking Fernet in bars, or how the Aperol Spritz, just took off and became explosive. Instead of just saying like, oh, everyone's drinking it now, you should drink it too.
Very polarizing. Yeah. That Spritz.
We want to give you knowledge. We want to explain what Amaro actually is, instead of you just being presented a list of Amaro now that it's super trendy at every single restaurant, right? Here's what Amaro is. Here's how it's made.
You break it down.
And so I think that's
a lot of different aspects.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we've grown so fast, and it's what's made us the largest publication in the space, is that, desire to really try to be, a friend of our reader, to, write things we know our reader wants to read, but also to come at them from a place that's like, we're not going to talk down to you. We're not here to say we know more than you. One of the biggest examples that we give is even the articles that we write. We never want to write about experiences that you can't have as a consumer. So there's another publication that a long time ago I was reading. It's a food publication, and they were writing about taking a tour through Spain with Jose Andres, and then one night, Jose Andres opened the hotel, got the hotel bartender to open the bar, and he made a crazy gin and tonic, whatever. We would never write that.
You and I ain't seeing that.
Who gets to go to travel with Jose Andres? One writer. So we really
fun,
try.
but not real.
Fun, but not real. And I think we have a lot of articles that are aspirational, obviously, but when you aspire to do them, you can do them.
Right. But the aspirations are within reason.
It's not, I'm hanging out with my chef friends, and they're making me off-menu stuff, and you can't do that. Which is why we also don't write a lot about highly allocated stuff.
Who contributes? Is it a stable of writers, or you go outside and have a lot of people?
So we have an amazing full-time team of writers in the office. What's up to those that are hopefully listening right now? So we're a really great staff of our editor-in-chief, Emily Saladino, is amazing. She's been with us for 2 years, and really runs the publication. And then we have some really awesome staff writers. So Kat Walensky is she's our senior staff writer. She writes a lot about beer for us, especially. And then Tim McCurdy is another one of our staff writers. And Keith Beavers, who I was saying had the wine shop before, he's our tastings director, right? And then we have what we would say in the business is a stringer, but a freelancer. We have, I think probably 45 or 50 of them right now from all over the country that will contribute maybe once a week, maybe once a month.
Stringer is like an understatement, isn't it? Aren't they prominent people?
They're super prominent writers.
They have some kind of angle into the business.
Absolutely,
whether they're a som or a writer.
Absolutely,
don't underplay that.
No, so Jamie Good is one of our
writers. There's a stable of outside people that
absolutely
are significant
and who contribute. So Jamie Good is one of our biggest wine writers. We have, Celine Bossart, who's a really amazing cocktail writer, spirits writer for us. So a bunch of different people like that who are contributing columns. Evan Rail, really, really great people who are there trying to help us, push everything forward. And then, also write for others.
Right. We talked about millennials in your market. So who are you targeting?
Millennials. But I mean,
is it even moving a little younger now? Do you have to be conscious of that? Because you ain't getting younger.
So we target, we come from this perception from this sort of position that we're targeting us, and for those that feel like they're us, whether you are young, you're millennial at heart, or you're a millennial, or you are someone who's a little bit younger and you're becoming curious, right? So you're starting to really drink better. I think, the publication isn't for you if you're someone that's still really into, shots and, just keg stands.
Right.
But the second that you've decided,
a little more evolved.
Yeah. The second you've decided that you're really interested in the culture of beverage, the lifestyle of beverage, then you become a reader.
Right. So I've been on the site a lot. It's very rich. Let's talk about some of the sections and features.
Absolutely.
primarily what's the wheelhouse? I mean, there's, like you said, the 5 stories every day, so you're always going to get content about everything. I mean, what else are we getting?
So you're getting reviews. So we do wine reviews. We do beer reviews as well. We do them
But
differently.
that's fairly recent.
Very
when
recent.
you launched, you didn't review.
We launched.
Why did you?
Readers asked for it.
They did.
Yeah. So
they trust the environment. What do you think? What should we drink? Right?
Exactly. And so we decided to go about it a very different way when we launched reviews. So we decided that we weren't going to review the wines blind. So they're non-blind. We know the price. We look at the label because that's how you buy.
And you abandoned
The 100-point system. All gone.
which is, classic Parker. I think Galoni still does it. So you went, why did you abandon it and what did you replace it with?
super confusing to people. What's the difference between a 92 and a 93?
Good point.
And then, we decided we wanted to sort of evaluate on, an A+ to a F scale, but we don't publish anything that gets below a B-. So we have a pretty clear policy that if your wine got below B-, it's not going to get a review. And we don't want to hate on something that someone may love, so it just doesn't show up as a review on the site. That's a very millennial thing, right? We don't like negativity. And then, we put the wines in buckets. So when Keith and the team are tasting, he'll say, okay, well, this is a $12 wine, right? So I think this is a really great wine for a backyard barbecue, for, a beachside, or for a house party, right? And then
Very practical.
And then it gets a B+ for those use cases. So we are trying to also break down this misunderstanding that readers told us they had when they would say, what is the difference between this wine on any of the other publications that use this 100-point scale that got a 92 that was $15 and this wine that got a 92 that was $100 besides the price? And so we're trying to say, well, this is a really great $15 wine, but this still is not going to be better probably than the $100 wine you're going to drink.
Right.
And also when
So
it's
you break it
$100,
down.
we're going to try to be a lot more critical, right? Because if the wine's expensive, it better be good.
Right. What, so you're doing reviews. Do you kind of take those reviews and do best of lists?
We do. We do lists. We do the top 50 wines of the year every year.
So if I went to the site and I'm like, I need to buy some wines.
There's tons of different
I can
stuff.
go to a best of list and get some recommendations for everything, white, red.
Absolutely.
bubbly.
If you wanted to do, if you were interested in rosé, we do the top 25 rosés of the year every year. That list came out at the end of May. That's a huge project for the team. Then we do, some featured columns. So we do this feature called Lucky Sevens, which is, we profile someone in the industry every week, and it's 7 questions to everyone in the industry,
It's like our wine list.
Exactly. We do, Bartography is a series actually Celine writes for us that's, a city guide through the lens of one of the city's top mixologists. So where do they like to drink? Where do they like to stay?
Right.
Where do they like to eat? So those types of things are also these sort of like anchor columns that we run. And then every Friday we do this thing called Need to Know, which is, it's funny. We started them sort of as a joke, and they're super popular. It's literally, here are facts you want to know about this
Break
brand.
down a single
brand
topic?
No, it'll be a brand. So like,
brand.
here's everything you need to know about Plymouth Gin.
Okay.
Right, so here's when they started. Here's what
Cool.
their blend is. People love that stuff.
Yeah, no,
because you just want to give nuggets to your friends.
What is, I brought you in here to talk primarily about wine, but you said earlier, it's almost a third, how people consume. What's hotter right now? It's probably a base question and the wrong question, but what's hotter? Beer, craft beer, or spirits? Or they're both having a moment?
So spirits is hotter. Craft beer is rising in a shrinking market. So
It's matured a little.
So beer consumption overall in the United States is falling. Craft is eating what is still in beer, but as a segment, it's not growing. And like if you look at all the facts coming out from the Brewers Association and things like that, it's they're very aware of it. So again, this goes back to they need to start talking to communities that aren't white dudes with beards, because if not, that market's going to continue to shrink. Wine continues to grow and spirits is growing, but wine's far and away.
Right. All right, I should come over there and give you a few noogies on your head, and the reason is that you launched a print magazine,
Yes.
like something you can hold. I mean, you've eloquently positioned yourself as a new media company. You know, you've taken a category, and here you go, and you publish a magazine. Why?
So, I mean, I've always loved print.
That doesn't. If I owned a men's clothing store, it may not be the best idea to put in what I like.
So I'll be very honest. Business wise, it's a marketing play.
Okay.
So
Support.
So
Just
it gets the brand in better places. The brand, you know, the magazine's now sold at McNally Jackson. It allows for some of the stories that are these long form stories we love to be told also in print and look very differently. And there are stories that we publish that really do deserve that print treatment. You know, but at the end of the day, it gets our brand, it gets VinePair in the hands of more people. We have partnerships with like Kimpton Hotels where it's in room. You know, so it's important for us for more people to discover us. Because as you said, like I'm never going to sit here and think like, oh, you like beverage? Well, then you've definitely heard of VinePair. I mean, then I would be super egotistical, and that's just not true. That's not reality. So the more people that we can expose to what we're trying to do, the better, and print lets us do that.
It's a good piece, a good extension.
100%.
You have the content, you have the name.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I
As
hope
long as
it
you can
does
financially
well.
support it.
No. I mean, that's all. It all makes sense. You know, it's part of a bigger plan. You are also a fellow podcaster.
Yes.
It's nice for you to sit down and learn from the master. But tell me, you co-host the VinePair podcast.
Yeah.
What are you doing, and what's the objective there?
So the idea is just talking, you know, having discussions about broader topics that, you know, you can't just have in print. So, for example, a large conversation about natural wine and sort of what's happening in the business. Or we had Matt Crafton on, the winemaker of Chateau Montelena.
He was on recently.
He has a lot of hot takes, you know, which I love. But so, yeah, he wanted to sort
Good
of,
guy.
So he also wanted to
You
have
know,
this
legacy winery, but young guy, different take. Like
super
you said,
cool.
hot take.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So, you know, we want to have these bigger conversations. We had a big conversation of this week's podcast about, you know, why this whole sparkling seltzer thing has exploded this summer. Like, where did that come from?
What is it, White Claw?
White Claw.
So White Claw is what? Just
Ain't no laws when you're drinking claws.
But it's just seltzer with alcohol and
So
flavoring?
it's a malt beverage.
Okay.
That's a sparkling malt
It
beverage.
sounds like Zima.
It is.
It is. Okay.
It is. It's all
It's just
repackaged.
the right time packaging and all.
Dude,
It just shows you marketing packaging. Was there any
Everything's cyclical.
influencer playing it? Like, was one of the Jenners holding it, or are
No,
they just organically?
It just explode. So sparkling seltzer is growing with the health and wellness movement. So it's this idea. That's what I think is so funny to me, and that's also, if we go back a little bit to what pisses me off about some people who are talking about natural wine as being better for you. Alcohol is alcohol. It destroys your liver. Like, at the end of the day, we all have to just admit that. But there's this belief that like sparkling seltzer must be better for me. I can run and then I can drink a White Claw. So people are like
Silly.
really into this. It's crazy.
All right, so the podcast is an opportunity for you to take a longer take on various subjects.
And again, brand extension.
If people want to find the podcast, they just go wherever they get their pods, right?
Everywhere.
the
Just
same
and
places
search
now.
VinePair.
And it's called VinePair.
The VinePair podcast, yeah.
And it's you and...
So Zach Jabal is the co-host. He's a sommelier actually in Seattle.
Good.
And so we pipe in and he's in a studio and then they cut and mix the whole thing. I get the easy job. I just talk.
I was just going to say, good, you have somebody who knows what they're talking
Exactly.
about, which is fine. All right. We have about 10 minutes left. Let's use it wisely. So what I wanted to do is subject you to our wine list.
Let's do it.
Ask all our guests to answer the wine list. We ask everybody the same 5 questions.
Okay.
Don't dwell on them. Don't overthink them. There's no wrong answers. You
Okay.
suck, you suck. You're good, you're good. You
Cool.
know, the answers are the answers. All right? And hopefully maybe you listen to the show before and you know what some of them are. So the first question is, what are you drinking now in the context of what's in your fridge? What are you trying to taste? What's interesting you at work?
So what I'm drinking now,
Seasonal,
What I'm
you know.
drinking now that I've been into for a little while now is Zino Mavro from Greece. Dude, it's just dope. It's
Greece is making some great wines,
Dude, they
great
are.
values.
They are.
Spell Zino Marvo for our people. Do we know? Is it Xinomavro?
Zino Mavro. I don't know. My friend Lena's gonna kill me.
I'll post, as I tell everyone, I post, all your answers and everything. What else? So
I was just in Italy and I got to go to Mount Etna for the first time. So I had some amazing, Etna Rossos, really delicious, Etna Biancos.
Terrific.
And then, it seems like I was there, and then Eric Asimov decided to write a column. I'm just saying.
I know.
But I think those are pretty amazing.
Great value too.
Great value. And then, I've come back to like good rosé. So I didn't drink a lot of rosé last summer.
Is good rosé from other places than
Yes.
Provence? Give me one or two. Actually, give me a favorite or two.
So my favorite is actually, it was the number one in our tasting, and it's from Etna. It's Gracchi's rosé.
Spelled Graci.
Dude, this rosé is fire.
It is.
It
Do
is
you know what
fire.
the grape is? Is it a?
It's Nerello Muscalese.
It is Nerello.
It is an awesome wine. It's
So there-
everything you want.
That's a great one. All right, you did a good job on that. I'm very encouraged. Do you have a favorite wine and food pairing? It's the silliest question in the thing, but is there something that is cool when you try it, or you've done it once a month, few times a year?
I mean, I think you should drink what you like with what you like to eat, but
That's a good answer. Which
yeah.
means if you like red wine with salmon,
I don't
screw
care.
it.
Yeah, screw
Yeah.
it. I mean, I just think that I think that's, again, this thing that intimidates the consumer, is this idea
It
that
has to
they're
be
doing
proper.
They're doing it wrong. Like, just order what you want to drink.
All right, I'm going to take that. All right, you mentioned one place, but let's get a little deeper, not too crazy, and don't feel like you're excluding anybody. Give me your favorite wine restaurant and or bar, and that's in the context of who's got the selection, who's doing it well, who's got the vibe. So I'm going to throw Ruffian in.
I can't
'cause
say
you talked-
Ruffian. I can't say
No,
Ruffian.
you can.
That's it,
That's
yeah.
one of. But any other places that kind of hit that note?
I mean, I've always liked the 10 Bells.
10 Bells.
10 Bells is-
by the way, is a natural wine bar, but great, nice vibe.
Just a nice vibe, nice
Yeah.
people. Gosh,
Restaurant where you go in and the wine's killer.
where I go to the wine's killer. I mean, there's so many places
In New York.
In New York, it's hard. Like, this place is dope. Roberta's is amazing.
Roberta's is a great, interesting.
Really cool wines, really
my
good
buddy
food.
Kirk Sutherland.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right.
But Ruffian is like my spot. They're the
That's
best.
good. All right, favorite all-time wine, and it's funny because when I first asked the question,
I know already.
the answer was always the trophy, the first time you had an expensive Burgundy. It's not about rare or price. It's about experience. When I got married, we opened a bottle of Salas, whatever. So what's your favorite all-time wine?
So do you want the actual producer, or do you want just the region?
I want specifics.
Okay. So before I started VinePair and I was doing the wine club thing, I'd been a year married, and Keith knew that Naomi and I were going to Italy. And I was like, I want to go to one wine region. And he's like, don't go to Tuscany, go to Piedmont. And
call.
I fell in love with Nebbiolo, like really hard.
Barbaresco, Barola, Lange. I mean,
So
what?
all of it, but the producer that I remember falling in love the most with at that time was Cigliuti. It's a Barbaresco producer. It's
You got to spell for me.
Gosh,
I'll correct you, but
C-I-
CIG.
GLUI, I think Chigli.
There's an I in there.
UI or
Liutti or something.
Okay.
Okay.
Cigliuti.
So Cigliuti,
And it was
Barolo
about
or Barbaresco?
Barbaresco.
Okay.
And it was everything. My wife and I showed up, in the late afternoon. It's two daughters that had taken over from their father. The daughter comes out with her dog. We go into the vineyard. It's at this point when it's mid-August. The berries are ripe. She's pulling berries off the vine. I'd never done that before. We're eating them. She takes us down into the cellar. We taste, and then she just was so, I guess, overcome with the fact that we had come and visited her that she just gave us 2 bottles and we took them home. We were like, we didn't pay for these. It was just the most special experience in the world.
There's the quintessential story experience.
Everything.
Matched up by, a quality product, people.
Yeah, and I'd never tasted anything like it.
That's a
and
good one. I will
pretty
post
amazing.
that. All right, we don't have a lot of time left, so we got to move quickly. And if you can't answer this to the T, because this is your wheelhouse, I always ask my guests, give me the best wine around $15-20, which is what we've been discussing, to recommend to my listeners. Give me a red, give me a white. You can give me a region, or like you could say Muscadet is the best white value. You can give me a maker, whatever. But give me a white, give me a red. Don't get nervous over this. Whatever comes to mind.
$15-20.
Retail.
It's a little difficult, I think. In terms of whites, I've gotten really into the whites from the Finger Lakes. I think that there's
Okay.
some really cool stuff coming out of there. But
Beyond
they can be
Rieslings?
Some Rieslings are really good, but they can be pricey, unfortunately.
Okay.
Also, a Assyrtiko from Santorini, still hot, still delicious.
That also could go over $20, but you could probably find some,
A
like
little.
a Sigelas maybe.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of reds, I think the best value is coming out of Spain.
Where is it?
So-
Ribera Sacra? Is it Rioja?
So
I
there's
mean,
there's still some great value. I mean, pound for pound, if you want to go to a restaurant, if you want to drink an older bottle of wine, it's Rioja.
okay.
I mean, again, it may not be for everybody. Some people may not like all the oak that they're still using, but pound
Very
for pound,
But even
Sold.
for value, can
For
you
value.
get a $20 Rioja?
yeah.
Okay.
And you can. That's what's so crazy is
Can you think of a maker? If you can't, don't worry about it.
I mean, I love Lopez de Heredia. Like they're an amazing maker, and they don't use as much oak. But any of those wines are really amazing value. I was just looking recently for my brother-in-law's 30th birthday at a restaurant in Philly, and they were selling a 2005 Reserva from Lopez de Heredia for $90.
but they release stuff later. So
That's
the
what's so-
5, I think, may be the current one.
And that's
or
what's so
something.
amazing.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing. So that's a good rec up. All right. So as always, we will post our guest. We'll post Adam's wine list, and we're going to take a quick taste of a wine Adam brought in. I always ask my guests if they can to bring something in. So Adam, what did you bring in?
So I brought you a wine from Virginia.
Why?
And the reason I brought you a wine from Virginia is people are sleeping on it and they need to stop. So
Okay.
basically, besides the dude in the White House, there are actual quality people that own wineries in Virginia.
Did he buy Kluge?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't even drink wine, so I don't know why he
No.
owns a winery. But this is Early Mountain, but there's a lot of
So the maker's Early Mountain.
Yep.
The name of the wine is Alluvium. It's a 2016 from Virginia, and it is 56% Merlot, 44% Petit Verdot. What does that mimic?
So it looks like it mimics a right bank Bordeaux.
Right.
It's like a Pomerol-esque style, and it's got everything you want, man. It's got acidity. It's got beautiful fruit. It's got tannin. It shows you that Virginia can do this, and I think it's going to blow up because DC is a market that's exploding. It's now, in terms of our readership, it's our number 2 market. Right, you have amazing restaurants opening there. You have awesome somms that are, they're working on the floor, and this region is super close, so it's gonna blow up.
Would you say years and years ago we scoffed a little at Long Island, and they've come a long way? Is Virginia making that move, or
I
it's
think
different?
Virginia's out far pacing the quality that's happening on Long Island.
So
By
better
far.
wines.
Much better wines.
Right, so
Much
they should
better
move
wines.
quicker.
They're going to move a lot quicker. There's a lot more money. So this is actually owned by Steve Case. This is Steve Case's vineyard.
Oh, it is.
So this is
He's doing a lot of good
This
stuff.
is money coming into Virginia and buying.
What's the retail on this?
It's $30.
$30. So it's
This is their high end though.
it's a real red. When we were talking about $15, $20 wines, you go into a dinner.
This is a nice wine.
The occasion wine.
And
all
someone's going to wine searcher it and see how much you spent anyway.
Right.
So you might as well.
that. What Let's just evaluate it quickly. So it's got that deep dark purple.
Yep.
It's got that Merlot and the Petit Verdot. What do you get on the nose?
So, I mean, you get, obviously the dark red fruits. You have lots of berry. There's also like
Dark berries.
a lot of vanilla there from the oak, but it's not a lot of oak.
Not
It's not
crazy.
too much. It's not too much.
Not crazy. All right, mouthfeel.
Herbaceous.
Pretty full bodied, right?
Full body, but soft.
Medium, right. The
Super-
tannins are soft.
Yeah, soft, plush, really, nice bright acidity, and it's a pleasure to drink.
And the palate, does it mimic the nose?
It does.
The black fruits,
All the black fruit
berries.
is there. It's exactly what you smell, and then the palate lingers. It doesn't die. So it's there, and it makes you want to sip again, which
All
is
right,
why I like
what
it.
do we pair this with?
I mean, come on, we should have a burger.
So this is great with a burger.
I think it'd be awesome with a
steak
burger,
and all
yeah.
that. Nice bloody burger. That's a good one. All right, so this is the 2016 Early Mountain is the maker, Alluvium from Virginia. So if you want to try wines from Virginia, go to this first. $30, bottle of wine. Thanks for bringing that in. Adam, we got to wrap up. Let me do a little show wrap up, and I'll ask you where we could get everything from you. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. On Instagram, we're at SBenRuby and the hashtag Instagram. The hashtag The Grape Nation. I'm sorry for that. On Twitter, we're at BenRuby and the hashtag The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we'll post Adam's wine list. I'll give you all the answers, the specifics, and all of that. and I will post our weekly wine sip. I'll give you the information on this Early Mountain on all our social media sites that I just mentioned. Adam, we didn't talk about handles or anything, but if people want to get to VinePair,
if you want to get to VinePair, it's at VinePair, so VinePair.
That's the site where all the columns, articles, reviews.
Everything, vinepair.com, at VinePair. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Adam Teeter.
Right. ADAMTETER. Teeter. I meant to say that. The podcast we talked about is VinePair, wherever you get pods. And the magazine, you said McNally, anywhere else?
So McNally has it right now in New York. Strand's getting it. You can also subscribe on our website. So
you're pushing to get it out there more.
Yeah.
Okay. Give you a little more long form than the site. All right. Thank you to our guest, Adam Teeter. Adam is the co-founder and CEO of VinePair. Now you know what that is. Thanks to our engineer, Amanda, and everyone at Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to learn more about our 10-year anniversary celebration happening all year long, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.